Radio Rahim here with Frank Warren. This is my first visit to your office. It is a boxing Hall of Fame. They should just host the Hall of Fame right here in this building.
Well, we're boxing people.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Well, you know, as Tyson Fury would say, you're a fighting man.
Well, a bit old for fighting now, but no, we love our boxing as fans as well. Everybody who works here, they're massive fans. I mean, it's like a big family here, so yeah, it's good.
So much of the history of the sport you have not just been a part of, but created. You know, part of being a promoter is really setting the stage and getting the imagination of the fans going and setting these matchups. And so as I walk through these halls and pop into these offices, I see so much boxing history. This is the kind of thing that maybe a kid thinks, well, I could never have that big an impact on the world. I could never do something that would make a sport as big as boxing as fundamentally a part of my life, to the extent that really you have plotted the course of part of this history of the sport.
Well, I think I've had my moments in boxing history over the period of time, but a lot of the stuff in the office they're not my shows. They're shows that when I was a kid I watched and so forth and grew up. Loads of old, we got old belts here from 100 odd years ago, 130 years ago, and that's just what it is. I'm just into the sport, and I recognise, obviously the contribution that a lot of promoters, the fighters, everybody who's involved in it has made over the years. And it's an exciting sport at its best. It's a great sport at its best, and I enjoy it.
You mentioned, how many different fighters are in here. Of course, they weren't all under your promotion, but they all kind of have something in common, being that they have that gladiator gene, that willingness to go in there and put their life on the line in a squared circle for this glory. And so people are like ourselves who are around the sport but not in the ring. There's something about that mentality that speaks to us as well.
It's look, boxing's the toughest sport. No matter which way you look at it, there's no tougher fight. There's no tougher sport than boxing. You have to sacrifice your life. If you're in a team sport, you're an American football player, you're a British soccer or football player, as we call them. You got a team. You can maybe go off and have a few drinks if you want to. You got some downtime, but you've got a team there. They got substitutions. Boxers, it's the two guys. As soon as that bell goes, they're on their own. All the preparation they do, everything they do. But once that bell goes, they're on their own, and that takes a special human being. Whether they're fighting in a 4-rounder, an amateur fight, big world title fight, whatever it is, it takes some balls to do that.
They have the advantage, though, of being able to look across the ring and see that opponent coming for them. On the night, it's just a single fight. But what occurs to me is, to be able to accomplish what you have, you've got to overcome quite a bit of fights yourself that people don't get to see. Some of them external, but maybe even some of them internal. What would you qualify or consider? How would you characterize your opponent in life? What is the fight you're in?
I've always been pretty, when I want to do something, I'm pretty single-minded. I put my blinkers on and I get on with it. And, sometimes you cannot take no for an answer when in the boxing game. You have to keep working hard to make it happen. But you've got to have that mentality. And then I like to think over the years, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from other people's mistakes, and you should learn something every day, I think, no matter how old you are. And that's my philosophy, just to keep working hard, keep doing the right thing, and just make those fights happen, make the big fights happen. But to get to big fights, you've got to develop the talent at grassroots level. They don't all show up as champions. They've got to start somewhere. So you've got to invest your time, your money, your resources into helping them achieve their dreams. And, as far as I'm concerned, achieve my dreams and the belief that I've got in them that they can do it. And sometimes you get it wrong and sometimes you get it right. And I like to think over the years I've got it more right than wrong.
But spoken like a true promoter, you turned my attention towards the fighters and the shows. But before you get there, you've got personally to overcome certain hurdles. You've got adversarial energies in your life that have to be bested before you can deliver for anybody else.
It's easier now than it was when I started out, because when I started out, there was only 2 TV channels in the UK, BBC and ITV. And ITV did not show any domestic boxing. They showed some overseas boxing from America, but they didn't show any domestic boxing. And the cartel, as they were called then, which was a group of promoters, 4 of them, and a manager who managed most of the top fighters, they got together. They had control over all the big venues. And that was it. So that was the system you had to fight. And the Boxing Board of Control back then were very sympathetic to them. They didn't like outsiders. I was an outsider. I was a young kid. Thought I knew it all, like all these youngsters still do. Thought I knew it all and so forth, and I didn't know it all. But, I learned very quickly, got stuck into it, and opened it up. And obviously, as, over the years, how the technology has changed how you watch fights, whether you're going to watch it on, in the early days, you used to go to the cinema to watch the fights in the early hours of the morning from the States, right. Closed circuit. Then you got, then satellite TV started, Sky came in. I developed their boxing on there. I did the first pay-per-view shows over here. And it's moved on all the time, and it's changed a lot. But you know what? The end of the day, what it's all about is the fight, because that's what you got to sell, and that's what you got to get people to want to see. That's what it's all about. And me, whoever the other promoters, whoever they are, you're not buying or paying pay-per-view or buying a ticket to see me. You're buying it to see a fight.
2 channels, a tight business. They don't like outsiders. You're certainly not born an insider. What made you think that you could crack this business and do anything here?
I didn't think about it. I just did it. I knew I'd do it. I got into it, the sport. I knew. What made me want to do it is because they kept trying to stop me from doing it. And the more they tried to stop me, the more flavour I got for it, and the more enjoyment I got out of it. And I enjoyed the competitiveness of it, and I worked very hard at it. And the majority of the press wouldn't speak to me because they were terrified of upsetting their source of their stories. So only a couple of journalists spoke to me in those early days. So it's very difficult to get to actually get any exposure. It's easy now. There's so many TV channels now. It's easy for these guys. Back then, I'm telling you, it was hard. It was hard.
Now, obviously, I'm coming from America, so you talk about watching the American fights in cinema here. That's not how we view them. They were American fights. We'd go to the show. Their cells are on the television. You'd go to the show, or you'd watch it on closed circuit in New York or Philly, wherever it was. There was the same thing out there. They still had closed circuit in America. Oh, that might be before my time. Well,
also, of course, it's before your time.
I was watching it in the living room on the TV.
I was listening on a radio on a crystal set.
I also know that the culture here is a bit different to America. There's a class system here, and people feel like they are in their level is just where they live their whole life. And obviously, you've got level. Obviously, you don't.
Well, listen, I lived in what we call council block of flats. That's where I live. You call them projects. That's where I live. That's where I was brought up. Working class background. You just go to work. I never even. There's class system. That's a load of crap. That may have been something going back to the sort of Dickensian times on. Maybe up until till sort of early part of the 20th century. That's all gone by the wayside. That's a nonsense. And you know what? That's a cop out.
You don't think people have that mentality, though?
No, I don't care about it. Listen, when I was a kid, there was hardly any black people, where I lived.
They were around, not around you.
That's what I mean. It was hardly where I lived. Obviously, it was a predominantly white country. That's what it was. And then there was a big influence from the Commonwealth countries, West Indies, of people coming over to get work and make this place a better place. And they did work and all contributed to make it work here. But I didn't. You didn't see that. Now, look at London. It's the most multicultural city in the world, bar none. it's great to see how things are, and you look at it. But all this class stuff is such bullshit. I think the people who use class, use that tag, are class conscious. They're the ones who talk about it all the time. There's no, there's no sort of people like the toffs and the workers. That's all like something out of My Fair Lady and all that. It's just a dead duck.
When boxing's culture is spoken about, a lot of times, like the era that you started in, it's thought of like as a poor man's sport or a gangster's business.
It wasn't a poor man's sport. Let me tell you something. I'll show you some old contracts I've got. Most of the fighters, the early days of fighting in this country and the Marquis of Queensberry rules and so forth, it was originally bare knuckles, and they stopped the bare knuckles not because of the injuries caused by cuts. You look at your knuckles, you look at your eyes, around your eyes, so many bad cuts. So that's when they started wearing gloves to pad it to help you not get the cuts. Otherwise the fights would all be over, bloody mess. Mm-hmm. And most of the boxers had what you'd call a patron. So they would put up the money, side bets, and you'd have a bet, big bets. So a lot of those people were aristocracy. You look at, I had a painting of the Marquis of Queensberry of all in the national, it was a set in the National Sporting Club when they used to have, and back then the National Sporting Club, fights, you weren't allowed to talk or cheer during the rounds. You were only allowed to talk during the break. So you weren't allowed to speak. So you'd sit in silence watching the fight. You cheered, you was out. So it's obviously it's evolved. Everything's evolved. Whatever sport you want to look at's evolved. But always in this country and around the world, the best fighter, and most people think big is better, the heavyweight champion, going back to the gentleman Jim Corbett, going back to where there was always probably one of the best known sportsmen in the world. So it's always been there for boxing, whether you were working class, whether you, as you're saying, whatever the class system was, whether you was at the top echelon of society, that's what it was. When a big fight was on, whether it was the lords or the toffs, because that's how they used to introduce fights in this country. The MC used to get up and say, "My lords, ladies and gentlemen, the main event of the evening," and that was how the crowds were made up. So you'd have a mixture of people, from guys off the street to people who were ruling, in government and so forth. That is how it was, and it's become like that again. And of course, there's gangs involved because of being involved, certainly in America. And you look at why is that? Because most kids come from the street. Mm-hmm. And when you're a street kid, I come from the streets. When you're a street kid, the tough guys, you look up to them. Because you don't know any different, do you? That's what you look up for. He's over there, Freddie or whatever it is.
Right.
He's the tough guy. He's walked in the club or the pub. He's the big tough guy, and that's how it was. And the working class kids looked up to that. But anyone who's broadened their horizons knows there's a bigger world out there. I didn't know it when I was a kid. I come from a tough background. When I was a kid, it was tough, and I got into some scrapes myself. But at the end of the day, there's a big world out there. And you take your blinkers off to the world, and you look at it, and you learn, and you hopefully educate yourself and broaden your horizons and make you understand other cultures, other people, and what the world's about.
People look at Frank Warren and all the success. You're in the middle of the big fights, as you say, on television, closed circuit, wherever we see these events, and assume that you are just a rich guy, always have been. It may surprise some people, especially outside of this country, to learn the way that you've come up. And I'm curious to know how that kid found his way into business at all. Like, what from the moment that you're the tough, you're the street.
Well, my
kid.
dad was a bookmaker, and my family, a couple of guys in my family were quite tough guys, and in the area I lived in. And I used to work when I was a kid. I used to go to the races with my dad on Saturdays, when I weren't at school. I went to a grammar school in this country. That was like going to university for me my family. Mm. You had a test called the 11th plus. I passed that. And I stopped going to school, by the way, when I was 14 and a half. My mum and dad split up, and it was easy for me to take advantage of that. And I never went back to school. I had nightclubs, I had pubs, very young age, in my very early 20s, I had machines, the bandits, the pool tables in pubs and clubs, and that's what I used to do. So it was quite a tough area that I lived in, and we had tables in a lot of North London pubs and East End of London.
You mean run
pubs.
the gambling?
There was some machines, the illegal gambling club were called Spielers. So my friends and family had shares in them, and we used to use them, but you didn't know any different. I didn't know any different because that's how I was brought up. And I got into boxing purely by accident, totally by accident. I loved it, but I got into it by accident. I mean, I was turned on to boxing watching. What really turned me on to boxing was watching Muhammad Ali against Cleveland Cat Williams, which I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I mean, I met Ali when he came over because my family, my uncle and his partner Albert Dimes, they were big friends with Angelo and Chris Dundee. And when Ali came over here, I met him. I was only a kid. I got a photo done with him when I was young. Sonny Liston, when they brought Sonny Liston over. So I've always steeped in it. I had a couple of cousins on my uncle's side who were professional boxers. So I was a boxing nut. I'm a sports nut. Arsenal crazy, go to the football, all these things. I loved it. And as I say, I got into it purely by accident.
When you say you got into it by accident, at least my understanding of how boxing still kind of worked at that time is the world you're in, the gambling, the pubs, the machines and all that, they're not that far removed from the boxing world. Was there overlap there? Were you introduced in that way?
No, I had a couple of boxers working for me. I remember a boxer called Johnny Cheshire worked for me. My cousin Johnny Wall, they both worked for us. Both of them good fighters, but playboys. Certainly John was. John he's passed away now. He was a lovely fellow, John, and he really had he was a lovely mover, really boxed well, but he was a playboy. He liked being out, and unfortunately, if you're a boxer, that ain't no good. It don't work. But so I was a fan. I used to go to all the fights. In those days, the small hall, like every town hall had boxing on. Like you used to go to York Hall, Acton Town Hall, Shoreditch Town Hall, Manor Place, Bath. There was a fight on nearly every other day in London. There was a small show on. I mean, I didn't go every day, but I mean, I'd go and try and at least go once, maybe twice a week, because I was a boxing nut.
And so how old were you then?
I was a kid. Well, when I first started going to fights, when I started going seriously, I was probably about 16.
Did you recognize 16 years old, right?
Yeah.
Now you're already working in business, you're dealing with people.
Well, at that age, I was working in Smithfield Meat Market. Oh. I was only young. I mean, I didn't get into the other business till I was in my sort of very early, well, probably about 20, 21, something like that.
Well, how'd you get out of the machines and the pubs into the meat market?
I just made some money and I got into it. That's what I decided I wanted to do. And I had a partner who was a few years older than me, and that's what we did.
What is like? I think a meat market. I'm going to Whole Foods to the butcher at the back. What do you mean?
No. The meat market is a big Smithfield is a big wholesale market. It's where everybody in London, all the butchers used to go and buy their meat from it.
Yeah,
it was the day before supermarkets would get all the people buying it. They would go to the local butchers, and most of the butchers went to the market to buy their meat. And I worked down there for a while. And I made good money down there.
So you work like you're providing you're hanging the cows on the hook. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I worked in there. I've done a few jobs down the market. Even done a bit of salesman as well for a little while. Yeah, I've done all sorts of stuff.
So does Rocky Balboa coming to the meat market, beating up cow carcasses? And
yeah,
he decided
that everybody was Rocky Balboa. Funny thing is, I'm a vegetarian. I eat fish, but I'm not eating meat for about nearly 40 years now.
I imagine working in a meat market might do that to you.
Put me off. Yeah. It did.
All right, so from the meat market, how do we get to the meat market?
Well, I just got involved and, I invested and got involved in a couple of clubs and pubs, and then we look after a few pubs as well, and that was it. And then my uncle Bob on my Aunt Kathy, on the Kathy's side of the family, Lenny McLean. Have you seen that film Lock, Stock and Two Smoking?
Two Barrels.
So that's devoted. That's dedicated to Lenny McLean, who's in it, and he was related. And I went to see him fight in a place called Sinatra's, a club over in South London. Sinatra's with a C. And we just went, he's fine. I never particularly liked Lenny. He was a big guy, but he was a bully. And I had a few ups over him over the years, early days. And we went to watch the fight, and he came out. And this Roy Shaw who came out of prison, was like, it's like a tough guys. They were a tough guy. They wore gloves and he was a tough guy. And he came out, as bell went, he came out and he hit Shaw and his legs went, and he never threw another punch. And he just went to the corner, put his arms up on the ropes. He went like that. So Roy Shaw hit him about 30 times, and he just slid down the corner post. And we went backstage afterwards. We went to his dressing room. We only went there as spectators.
Yeah. And
went back to my uncle. My uncle gave him a bollocking. He said, what was that? Why would you let someone do that? And he'd never trained. He'd never done an ounce of training or anything. And that was that. And Shaw was a former, he was a former licensed boxer before he went to prison. And that was that. Anyway, about, 5-6 months later, a rematch was made. And he came to see my uncle. And Bob said to him, listen, if you're going to fight again, you need to go and get a trainer. So, as I mentioned earlier, Johnny Wall, again on that side of the family, Johnny Wall had a trainer called Freddie Hill. He looks after the Finnegan brothers, very good fighters in this country. Won a gold medal in the Olympics. And he went over, he got him to train Lenny. So he trained him for the fight, but because he was licensed by the boxing board, he couldn't get in the corner. So the week before the fight, Lenny went to see my uncle again. He said, listen, I'm told if I win this fight, I'm going to have a problem. So he went, yeah, and don't even ask me how. So his cornerman on the night was me, my uncle, and John Wall. So we were the three cornermen in the corner. That is how I got into boxing.
Your first job in boxing was a cornerman.
I worked after that professionally. I used to work Joe Bugner's corner when he came back. I mean, that's when I got my license. But that's how I got into boxing.
Wait, now you're a fighter. You're in the corner.
I didn't go in. I knew shit about boxing. I'm a punter. I don't know what to do in the corner. We're in the corner because they're saying that if he wins, they're going to sort him out.
Well, okay, well,
and what happened? What was funny? Because these fights were, they were like Wild West type of thing. And Roy Shaw, Lenny hit him again, and he knocked him over, and they counted up to 30, I think. So, and he got up, then they rang the bell, and then he came out, and then Lenny hit him again, and he took off and went through the second and top rope with his feet, caught the rope, and he cut down. And anyway, that was that. And he won the fight. Nothing happened to Lenny. He was all okay because, people were with him, and there was no problem with anyone. And then about a month later, they wanted to have a rubber match, the third match, because they won a piece. And we went to a meeting with Roy Shaw's people, and they offered. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I don't know I've not been involved in any of this. So I'm sitting there, and my uncle's like, he's much older than me, and he's talking, and they offered Lenny some stupid amount of money. It was like crap money. And I'm like, what? And they said, well, we're going to put it on. This is what we're going to. It's like it was a fait accompli. This is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I piped up, and I just turned around and I said, well, he's just beat you. What are you talking about? Split the money or something. You're both. And it was like, that's what it is and whatever. So I said, well, what does he need you for? He's just beat you. You go and fight someone else. And they said, well, I said, we'll put it on. Mm. I don't even know why I even said it, I swear to God. So when we left the office, their office, went down, my uncle said, what the effing hell, what's going on? What'd you say that for? I said, I don't know. I just said it. He went, well, and I shouldn't have said nothing. And that is the truth, how I got into promoting, or we at the time got involved in promoting a fight. And then next time, Lenny then fought this guy from Ilford, just in Essex. Well, it was Essex in those days. He fought this guy who was a nice bloke called Solly France. He had some really nice people who was with him, these two guys. And we had a big bet, and that's how we made our money, because we used to have bets. And Lenny kept all the gate money and, after all the X's and out of it, and sold out. He made a few quid. I always remember on the night, which was quite amusing, about 6 o'clock at night, someone turned around and they said, we've got no gloves. And it was due to start in about half an hour or so, or an hour. We never had any gloves, so I had to ring somebody out who brought this big suitcase full up boxing gloves. It's just stupid, because we never knew. I didn't know what I was doing, and that was it. And just got bitten by the bug, and then I ran a lot of these. Then I formed an association called the National Boxing Council, and then we got eventually the Boxing Board of Control. They were fed up with me sort of pissing in the tent. They said, come and join us, and they said, we'd like you to take out a license, and that's what I did. And then they tried to screw me big time, and that was it.
Well, saying what you said in the meeting, now you're upsetting the apple cart a little bit, going against the plot.
I was 23, yeah.
So that's got to start already. That there starts the legend of Frank Warren.
Well, that was a legend. Legend. That was it, yeah.
That's branding you, right? Though a bit of a troublemaker. Is that?
No, I always stood my ground. I still do. I'll stand my ground, and that's how it come about. And it came. Listen, I've got to be honest. As I said with Lenny, he wasn't the nicest guy in the world. So it was just the fact of what was going on, and that was it. And it was fun. Yeah. It was a challenge. What am I doing? It's a bit of fun.
But how do you deal with these guys who are the kind of guys that say, this is how it's going to be. This guy wins, this guy loses. If this guy wins, he's going to have a bit of trouble.
Just told them this is how it's going to be. There's going to be trouble. In those days, if there had been trouble, there'd have been trouble. But there wasn't any trouble because everybody was happy and we moved forward.
So, all right, you go from being the guy in the room who's not supposed to say anything to actually putting these fights on. What's that experience like once you have the responsibility in your hands? Well,
look, first of all, I didn't know about the health aspects of boxing, doctors, although there was a doctor at ringside, but, I was totally unaware. And back in those days, you remember fights were 15-rounders. The weigh-ins were on the day of fights. I'm talking about legitimate fights, and they used to let them go on a bit. These fights went on a bit sometimes, and, they would never have been happening. But I didn't know any different. So I was stupid, but then the penny dropped, and that's why we formed the association. We started getting the guys tested, but it lost a bit of the glitz and gloss about it then, because people don't want that. They want a cockfight. They want to, they want to see these guys just go and knock their heads off of each other. They don't give a shit, do they? They're all there spitting sawdust, kill him, and that's what it was. But I didn't. I sort of fell out of love with that, and as I say, I went the other way, and that was it. And I took my license out, and so I've been doing this for 46 years now.
Well, okay, in a time when that's what people want, the money's there, you got a little bit of gambling on the side. You're the kind of guy that says, well, that's what it is. If it's trouble, it's trouble. That means you're a bit of a tough yourself. Why go the other way? Why not just swim with the current?
Why does that go to boxing?
Well, no, why make legitimate fights if you can make these other fights?
All it could go was that level. We were at one stage when we formed this association, we were going to, we applied for the WBA to be affiliated by them. And the Board of Control there was only two organisations then, that was the WBC and the BA. And the Board of Control wouldn't only recognise the BC. So when they see we was going to make that move, they sent out Lord Moynihan, Colin Moynihan, lovely bloke. And he went out there to put representation, don't have nothing to do with them, Board of Control, we're proper, and that's what happened. So they affiliated to it, and I just, it was at a level. And I started signing up some young kids, good fighters, a couple of good young fighters, and they needed better than what they needed. They needed a better platform than that was, and so. As I say, I got invited in. I took the license out, and that was that.
Was there anybody trying to hold you back into the?
No, I'd done what I wanted to do. And when I took the license, what they were trying to screw me, the cartel, before I got the license. It was tough. They had control of all the venues in London. There was only in those days, the sort of recognised venue was Wembley Arena, and Royal Albert Hall. Sometimes you got stuff at Earl's Court, it had to be a big event, and they controlled them. And the Board of Control operated a policy that there was no major shows within 14 days of each other. So all they had to do was put a show on every
2 weeks.
And when you're done. And so I had to be, use my brain and whatever. So I was putting shows on in big hotel ballrooms, in circus tents, big tents, marquees, and it was fun.
And that didn't get you in any trouble?
No, I mean, again, it was about getting it done. Because the thing about boxing, you can't delay, unless somebody gets injured, you can't delay. You're working to a timetable, aren't you? That's what it's going to be. That's what you got to do. You get that date, it's all going to happen. You got to weigh in on this date. You got to weigh. This is what you got to weigh. Everything is timetabled. And then there was no TV, as I said. And eventually I got a break with TV. I fought hard to get that happen, and we went on from there.
Do you get your board certification? You got a license, and it's smooth sailing.
No,
immediately. Then it's the easy life.
It was the first show I ran. I did it. I remember Frank Gelb, who was based in Atlantic City, and he helped me with some, get a couple of fights, and we got 2 Americans. I put on. I can't remember. It was O.T. Gordon and oh God, I can't think who it was now. It's terrible. Anyway, put it on, and I thought I was going to get TV for it, but then the Border Control had this policy that if you hadn't promoted a certain amount of fights, you couldn't put television. You couldn't have television. So that died a death. And on the day of the show, and I was doing, with the other shows, I was doing fairly well. On the day of the show, the place was empty. You could have driven a double-decker bus around the venue and not knocked anybody over. It was spark out. And I lost a lot of money. And that was a good lesson to learn. And, and I should have known better, but I got, with all these regulations and so forth, and I didn't really pay attention to that the first show. So next show, I'm on it. I mean, that was my Bible then, their rule book, and they tried to fuck me with the rules, and in the death, I become the fucker rather than the fucky.
The fucky, yes. Now, I imagine in early days, you don't have a lot of room for error. I mean, you've made yourself a bit of money, you've gotten into the business, but you can't take, 2 big losses like that in a row. It's got to be kind of a high wire act.
But look, the key to being successful in boxing, you have to have a TV deal. And the only way you're going to get a TV deal, you've got to deliver. God-given right to get TV. You've got to go and work for it, and I worked for it. And I got a TV deal. I got ITV. I got them to get involved in British boxing, domestic British boxing, and it was a hard slog, but I got them there. And in those days, a bloke called, he's passed away now, Bob Burrows, who was the head of sport for Thames Television, because there was different regions. It was made up of different regions, and he got behind it with me. And we brought Joe Bugner. I brought Joe Bugner back from America, who was he was the fighter that everybody loved to hate over it. He was a good fighter, by the way, heavyweight. And I brought him back over here, and we put a few shows on with him, and we sold out, and it started. I got the TV deal, and I got other fighters, and I started building and moving, and eventually broke the cartel. Well, just broke it up. There was no cartel, and that was it. Killed it.
But from going from these small shows to TV, you make it sound like a quick transition.
No, it took a couple of years, but it was what it was.
So these guys who have the bigger venues, they want TV deals too.
They had a smaller venues. They had the BBC. They had the BBC tied up. Nobody could get a look in.
So how did you get a look in?
Because I went, why did I?
How? Yeah, how and why?
I got one fight on BBC, the very first show I ever did, because I made them do it. I had to do it to get it on? It's a long story, too long.
We have a little time.
But I've got, send everybody to sleep. No, it's, what happened was at the time, I won a purse bid, and the fighters didn't, and the manager was very friendly with Mickey Duff. He didn't want to go to purse bid, and I got them to go to purse. I said, I promise you I'll win the purse bid, which I did. And then it was 2 boxers, they probably won't mean nothing. Steve Early and Clinton McKenzie. Two good fighters. Clinton was a good fighter. And I went to the BBC, and they said, we can't do this. And there was no live TV then. It's just shot on a delayed basis. Shot the following day. Because the Border Control didn't want no live boxing on TV. And I always remember this bloke called Jonathan Martin. He was the boss there, and I said to him, he said, we can't do that because I couldn't get a date. I couldn't get the day before for them to show it on. They used to show the boxing on the Wednesday night, and then show the highlights on another sports program on the Saturday, like the undercard and bits and pieces. So I couldn't get the night. And he went, oh, God. I said, well, what about if I said, I can't get a Friday night. I said, otherwise you could show. He said, well, you could get a Friday night. We would have shown it. I said, well, I can't get one. I said, what, if I'd have got one, that's an out for him. He don't think.
Right.
But I already got the Friday night. I had that, and I wanted him to commit himself. And I went, and I'll give it about 2 hours rain, but I'm not going to blip. We're in business, me and you. I told him, and he could have heard the other end, it all went quiet. And they did it, and then they offered me real crap money. I mean, abysmal money. But it didn't matter to me. It was about getting the show on the road, doing it and breaking their hold. And I did that, and then obviously ITV see that I did it and so forth, and I got involved quite big time with ITV, got them into boxing, into domestic boxing, in a big way. They were spending fortunes. And then we got to a stage where we wanted live boxing.
Right.
I said, I want to do it live. We do it live. One, you do it live, I want more money. Yeah, we do. So we got the border control, you can't have it. And I wound up, we was going to go to court, and cut a long story short, I killed that. And they settled, and we started I'd done the first live shows.
What's the logic of not having live shows? I mean, you don't put live boxing
because their
on.
logic was that if it's live, people won't buy tickets.
Oh, it's the promoter and the network that don't want it live.
That's what the situation. And what happened was they had a cozy relationship where the fights, as I said, will be on a Tuesday night. They'd show them on the Wednesday, and then the highlights would get shown on the Saturday, some of the undercards. So they're getting all these bites. And I get it, I understand that, but, it's not where this is like early 80s, very early 80s. And I, for me, the product stands up or it doesn't. And it did, because we used to sell out and we had live TV.
Now, where's the underbelly kind of element there? Live boxing, and it's not on TV. That's got to make for even more of an exciting gambling environment. There's other businesses happening.
I suppose it was gambling in a different way. I weren't having bets on the fights then, but it was gambling, because you obviously listen, no matter what anybody feels about promoters. Promoters put the money up. Mm-hmm. They put the event together, and they're responsible. Win or lose, that's their risk. And that's how it is. There's no association like in NFL or football over here, or cricket or rugby or basketball, where the association goes and negotiates with a TV company. Say, right, we got a pot, there's X in there, we're going to cut this all up between everybody. We, as promoters, go and individually go to the TV companies and negotiate our rights fees. And then and let me tell you something, contrary, the rights fee don't cover the show. Certainly didn't back then. So it was the combination of the gate money. There was no sponsors back then, no advertising on the corner post, none of that here. They didn't even have round card girls. I mean, didn't have the music. They just have only the main event would have a fanfare, like trumpet and da-da-da-da-da-da, and the guys would walk in. So we put the music in, and just a bit of bullshit, glitzing it up. But as I said from the beginning, it's all about the fights, because that's all the people want to see. It's
all about the fights for the people, but you just described all the things that you have to pay for to get this fight on, and how much of a responsibility it is for you. There's no league, there's no big commission or board helping you to put this together. So in a boxing world like that, there are the element of toughs that want a piece of that are offering you money to, help you with the cost for a little bit of piece of the action.
I never had any of that stuff. I wouldn't have wanted it anyway. I mean, it was down to me, and that was it.
No one came to you try to get involved.
From the area, from where I grew up, a couple of people want to get, but it was never no strong arming, nothing like that. No. People, people from all sorts, from all backgrounds wanted to get involved, but it weren't for me. I knew what I wanted to do, and it was my business, and I wanted to run my business.
And so you're running your business. You've got a TV deal now, which is one of the incredibly difficult things to get. How do you progress through the kind of ranks of promoters, and how do you distinguish and define yourself?
I've got to sign fighters.
Yeah.
And develop fighters, because that's the key to this business, is developing fighters. A lot of guys come in and they fighters are at a certain stage, and the grass is always greener. Easiest thing in the world is to sit down and say, come here, I'll get you a few more quid or a few more dollars more. And they listen to all the bullshit. And you know what bullshit does? It makes the grass greener. That's all it does. And at the end of the day, a lot of people become disappointed what they think is going to happen. And some just try and justify being dogs by saying he's a bad person and all that crap. But invariably, it all evens out. What goes around, it comes around. Everything evens out. You do somebody a bad turn, you're going to get it bad. So you've got to just play the game. And you know, and I've always tried to do that. And I've been very successful with developing fighters. I think us at Queensbury, I think we do the best job, one of the best jobs, if not the best job in the business, in bringing fighters through.
For any promoter, it's hard to...
And picking the right matches at the right time.
It's difficult for any promoter, really, to maintain a image of, oh, you know, I'm doing what's best for the fighter. I'm a fair guy and fair dealing and a nice guy and all the stuff that you have to be to present yourself as an attractive place for people to do business and trust you with their money and then buy a ticket from you on top of that from the masses of fans. At that stage, what is your kind of brand or reputation in the business?
Delivering. It's delivering.
But if people like you, or you have to be tough, you have to be...
I think you do a bit of everything. I mean, everybody's different. How me and you talk is different how I talk to somebody else and different how you talk to somebody else. Everybody's different. And I think what you do, you've got to be able to communicate with people and you've got to let them see that you are doing your best. Look, for me, the best, when you get to a certain stage, the fighter obviously wants to get big money. The best way to do it, here's the pot, you take X percentage and we'll take a percentage. And that's it. But most fighters, no, we guarantees. Fine, you have a guarantee, but it is what it is.
What's the fighter that puts you over? Like you say, you have to go sign fighters, right? So everybody's not a golden goose or a...
No, most of the fighters, I mean, you know, a lot of fighters I've had success with over the years didn't win Olympic medals. They didn't go to the Olympics. They're hungry. They didn't get that opportunity. Because let's get it right. You know, you look at the great American Olympic teams over the years. You know, the Whitakers, the Leonards, the Oscars, all those guys. Same with us over here. We had guys going to Olympics, and certainly when they started giving grants to boxers, you know, paying amateur boxers money so that enabled them to train and prepare for these tournaments and so forth. That doesn't necessarily mean they're the best boxer. That's somebody's opinion. Who's in charge of the amateurs, that he is the best boxer. He may not be. There may be another guy out there who never got the opportunity. And like Joe Kawasaki didn't go to the Olympics, Ricky Hatton didn't go to the Olympics, Nassim Hamed didn't go to the Olympics. I can reel off Nigel Benn didn't go to the Olympics. You can reel loads and loads of names off of fighters. Tyson Fury didn't go to the Olympic Games. There's a lot of them.
So early days, are you finding these guys? How are you building your stable?
Yeah, well, you hear what's some of the good fighters around, and I used to go to more amateur shows than I do now, because obviously you've got the benefit nowadays of the footage and the filming of it. But I would, I'd keep my eye out and ears to the ground, and people would tell me, and I would make a beeline. And if I really wanted to sign someone, and I did believe in them, I would get them. I would say 9.5 times out of 10 I'd get them, because I believe in it and I know what I'm going to do and I know I'm going to make it a success, or I believe I'll make it a success. Sometimes you do get it wrong, but invariably it's your judge. It's all judgment. That's all it is. It's like I'm looking at the form. I'm looking at a horse race. It's my judgment who I fancy. Same with the boxing. It's my judgment. Who am I going to back? Who am I going to get behind? And that's it.
What's your pitch to the guy in early days when they don't know your name, they know another guy's name, and you're saying sign with me, not him?
I signed a lot of young fighters.
Yeah.
I really did. I signed quite a few young fighters, quite a few amateur, good amateurs, good quality amateurs. I remember signing 4 up in one go, which shocked everybody.
How you done it?
Sorry?
How'd you do it?
Well, I went and sat down and spoke with them and looked after them and did a deal.
Come on, Frank. What's the pitch?
No, that was it. I remember taking 4 of mine to a nightclub at the time in the city of London, and I remember I was sitting in there, and one of them I didn't quite like, and I should have really at that stage got shot of him. And he thought he was a wise guy. He thought he was a smart, different thing. Wise guy is what you call wise guy, smart ass.
Yeah.
And I'm watching him, and we're eating, and they were training for a tournament coming up. and we were eating, and he's like, there was a trolley with the desserts on them and cakes, and and it was mirrors everywhere, and I've got him in the mirror, and I can see him like taking the cake. He thinks he's just behind my back, and it's just a silly thing. But I knew then he would be a no good bastard, and he was.
Because he was nicking the cake.
I ain't got a problem. He could ask for it, but he shouldn't have been having it anyway. But he thought he was a smart ass. And I see him do it. I never said anything. I just looked at him. I remember saying to her, late Ernie Fossey, who was my matchmaker, I said, he's going to be a prick, him. And he was.
You got yourself a little stable. You got, some pricks who can fight, and some guys are actually some good decent fellas. What's the one now? You say your brand was to deliver. That was the Frank Warren calling card. This guy can deliver. So who's the first guy that was able to deliver for you that gets you over?
Joe Bugner was the first one, but he'd already been around. But that was my first big TV date when we did quite a few fights. I mean, I remember he fought Marvis Frazier. I remember Joe coming over because it was his son. Big fight here. We done quite a few of those. I signed up some good fighters. We did a fight called Terry Marsh. He won a world title with me.
Is that the first world title that you promoted?
I think he may be. Yeah, it was I don't think it's the first one I promoted. He won. No, Colin Jones, I believe, was the first one who I promoted as a world title for a world title. But he got beat by Don Curry, who was an extremely good fighter.
Is that the benchmark for a young promoter? Like, I've got a world champion, or is it just I've got a sellout arena? Like, what's the benchmark? I think
it's a combination of everything. Success is the benchmark, isn't it? Making it, it's a great event. It's exciting. Everybody's loved it, and they want to come again. They want to see the guy who's in there who you're promoting. That's success. If you put all this together and no one shows up, it's a disaster. Success is in boxing. It's really simple, especially with pay-per-view. You either sell or you don't sell, and if you don't sell, the public didn't want you.
So what do you call it? Was it Bugner, you said?
Joe Bugner.
Bugner. Is that the first guy that was like...
He went 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali. He fought him in Malaysia. He fought Joe Frazier. He was a good fighter. He's a big guy. But he was... he could have done better than he did. But I thought he was an extremely good fighter.
In those days, was it still the case?
He didn't start out with me. I brought him back. He was been with a cartel.
So in those days, was it still the case that America's like the clearinghouse? Like, you got to...
Well, in those days, British heavyweights, Dorothy Parker's famous line, if you laid out all British heavyweights end to end, she wouldn't be surprised. Because that's what happened. They got beat all the time when it comes to the big fight. But now, look at it. It's the other way around now. Look how dramatically, in my lifetime, my time in boxing, how it's changed. That the best heavyweight, the biggest and best, were Americans, and they're Brits now.
So then, knowing that being the reputation of British fighters, was your goal to be the biggest in Britain, or were you...
No, I didn't think about any of that shit. All I was interested in was getting on, and whatever happened. I don't think I'm the best. I've got to be. I don't even dream of that. All I want is get it on. Just do it. Get the fight on, get the event on, and all I want to do is get to a restaurant and have a nice glass of wine and enjoy myself. That's it for me. And if I can get to a couple of concerts in the course of the week, then I'll do that. I'm absolutely like a pig in shit. And if I can get to see Arsenal go and do the business and something, then I'm really flying. I'm flying like a flyer.